I'm expecting. Serena Everhart whispered the words to her reflection for the 10th time that evening. Every attempt ended with the same nervous smile. No. She laughed softly. Too ordinary. She tried again. Damien, we're going to be parents. Her eyes shimmered with happy tears. Perfect. She gently closed the velvet box in her hands. Inside rested a tiny silver baby bracelet engraved with 2 words. Daddy's Little Wolf. The Royal Winter Gala filled the palace with music and celebration. Crystal chandeliers bathed the grand ballroom in warm golden light. Nobles from every allied kingdom danced across polished marble floors. Servants carried silver trays, overflowing with sparkling wine. Tonight wasn't just another royal celebration. It marked 7 years since Alpha King Damien Blackwood and Luna Serena had pledged themselves to one another before the moon goddess. For weeks, Serena had secretly planned every detail. The musicians played Damien's favorite melodies. The banquet featured dishes from every province he loved. Even the fireworks waiting outside had been chosen because he once admitted they reminded him of the night he proposed. She wanted this anniversary to become unforgettable because before the night ended, she planned to tell him the secret that had filled her heart with joy for days. A child. Their child. As she slipped the velvet box into her cloak, the royal physician smiled knowingly while passing her in the hallway. Your Majesty, she blushed. I still haven't told him. The physician chuckled. I doubt His Majesty has ever received happier news. I hope so. She rested a protective hand against her stomach. I've imagined this moment for years. Across the ballroom, Damien had disappeared. Serena looked around, amused. Where has my husband gone now? One of the palace guards bowed politely. Your Majesty, I believe the Alpha King is waiting in the old moon garden. Serena's smile widened. So that's where he's hiding. She laughed quietly to herself. He must have planned a surprise first. Clutching the velvet box tightly, she hurried through the palace corridors toward the gardens where Damien had first confessed his love years ago. Moonlight spilled across white stone pathways. Winter roses bloomed beneath silver branches. The garden stood almost perfectly still. Then, she heard someone crying. A woman's voice. Serena slowed her steps. Perhaps one of the guests needed help. She quietly rounded the marble hedge and stopped breathing. Damien stood beneath the ancient moon willow. Facing him stood Lady Vivian Ashcroft, his former fiancée. Vivian's shoulders shook with quiet sobs. Damien gently brushed tears from her face. Serena frowned in confusion. What was happening? Vivian looked up at him. Her voice trembled. I don't want my last memory to be goodbye. Damien closed his eyes. For one long moment, he simply stood there. Then, he leaned forward and kissed her. Not hurriedly, not carelessly. Slowly, tenderly. Long enough for Serena's entire world to collapse around her. The velvet box slipped from her trembling fingers. It struck the stone path. The tiny silver bracelet rolled across the moonlit ground. Neither of them noticed. Only when Serena stepped backward did Damien hear the sound. He turned. Their eyes met. Every color drained from his face. Serena. He took one desperate step toward her. She looked at him, then at Vivian. The woman she had once believed belonged only to his past. A strange, peaceful smile touched Serena's lips. One so calm. It frightened Damien far more than tears ever could. She swallowed the 1,000 questions breaking inside her. I'm sorry. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. I didn't know I was interrupting. She turned, walked away without another word. Serena, Damien called after her. She never looked back. Behind her, forgotten beneath the moonlight, lay the tiny silver bracelet, the future she had dreamed of telling him, now scattered silently across the garden stones. Damien ran. The moment Serena disappeared beyond the garden gates, he pushed past the hedges without another thought. "Serena!" His voice echoed through the moonlit palace grounds. She never stopped. Her grey gown disappeared into the darkness of the eastern corridor. By the time he reached it, she was gone. Only then did he notice something glinting beside the stone path, a tiny silver bracelet. He bent down and picked it up. His brows furrowed. Engraved across its delicate surface were 4 simple words. Daddy's little wolf. His heart skipped. Before he could make sense of it, Vivian's trembling voice came from behind him. "I'm sorry." Damien turned sharply. "What have we done?" Vivian stood exactly where he had left her, tears streaming down her face. "I told you this was a mistake." He closed his fist around the bracelet. "I have to find my wife." "You should." Vivian's voice cracked. "You should have gone after her the moment she arrived." Without another word, Damien sprinted back toward the palace. His pulse thundered in his ears. He reached the lunar wing and pushed open the doors. The rooms were silent. Serena. Nothing. He searched the sitting room, the library, their private balcony, the music room where she loved to play on winter evenings. Empty. Every room was empty. A cold unease settled over him. He hurried into the dressing chamber. The sight before him stole the air from his lungs. The moon crown rested neatly upon its velvet cushion. Her ceremonial jewels lay beside it, her royal seal, her wedding ring. She had left everything, except herself. "No." His whisper echoed through the room. Captain Rowan burst through the doorway. "Your Majesty." "The servants cannot find the Luna. Search the palace. We already have. The gardens. Nothing. The stables. 1 horse is missing." Damien felt the floor sway beneath him. "My study." He almost ran. The letter waited exactly where Serena had placed it. He unfolded it with shaking hands. "I won't compete with the woman you never stopped loving." His vision blurred. There was one final sentence. Goodbye. Nothing more. No accusations. No anger. Only surrender. He stared at the paper until the ink became impossible to see through the tears gathering in his eyes. A frantic knock interrupted the silence. The royal physician entered without waiting for permission. His expression was unusually pale. "Your Majesty." Damien looked up. "What is it?" The physician's gaze fell to the silver bracelet still clutched in Damien's hand. Understanding spread across his face. "Oh no." "What?" The physician swallowed hard. "I thought Her Majesty had already told you." "Told me what?" A long silence followed. Then came the words that shattered whatever hope Damien still possessed. "Queen Serena was expecting." Damien's entire body went still. "No." The physician nodded sadly. "She was carrying your child." The bracelet slipped from Damien's fingers. It landed beside Serena's farewell letter. For a moment, he could neither breathe nor think. His wife had left. His unborn child had left with her. And he had never even known they existed. He looked toward Captain Rowan. "Seal every border. Send riders to every neighboring kingdom. Search every road, every village, every mountain pass." His voice broke. "Find my wife." The captain bowed immediately. "Yes, Your Majesty." Within the hour, soldiers rode in every direction. Royal messengers crossed the kingdom. Watchtowers lit warning fires. The greatest search in the kingdom's history had begun. But before the first riders even reached the northern forests, Serena had already crossed beyond the last border, far beyond Damien's reach, and behind him, inside the palace he had once called home, a dying woman prepared to reveal the truth that Serena had never stayed long enough to hear. Vivian Ashcroft had only weeks left to live. Damien learned that truth the same morning he lost his wife. She sat quietly in the palace infirmary, staring through the window as snow drifted gently across the gardens. The royal physician stood beside her. There is nothing more we can do. Vivian simply nodded. She had known for months. When Damien entered the room, his face was pale from exhaustion. Search parties had already spread across the kingdom. Not a single rider had found Serena. He stopped several feet away. His voice was barely audible. "Tell me everything." Vivian lowered her eyes. "I suppose I owe you that." Silence lingered before she finally began. "When the physicians told me I was dying, I realized there was one regret I had carried since I was 18. She smiled sadly. "I spent years imagining the life we almost had." Damien remained silent. "I didn't come back because I wanted you. I came back because I wanted to let that dream die." Fresh tears slipped down her cheeks. "I asked for one last kiss. Just once. So I could stop wondering what might have been." She laughed bitterly. "I thought after that, I'd finally be able to leave this world in peace." Damien closed his eyes. "And I agreed. You shouldn't have." "I know. I thought I was giving a dying woman closure." His voice cracked. "I never imagined Serena would see us." Vivian looked directly at him. "The kiss didn't destroy your marriage." He frowned. "What did?" "You believed one secret couldn't hurt the woman who trusted you most." Her words struck harder than any accusation. For the first time, Damien understood. It wasn't the kiss alone. It was the deception. The hidden meeting. The decision to let Serena remain unaware. Trust had died long before she opened the garden gate. 3 days later, Vivian left the palace forever. She refused every title Damien offered, every carriage, every servant. "I've already taken enough from your life." She died quietly before winter ended. Before her passing, she left Damien one final letter. It contained only 3 short sentences. "Don't waste your life mourning me. Find your wife. She's the only woman who ever truly loved you." Damien carried that letter for the rest of his life. Weeks became months. Months became years. He searched every neighboring kingdom, every mountain village, every merchant caravan crossing the continent. Nothing. Serena had vanished, as though the moon goddess herself had hidden her. Meanwhile, the Alpha Kingdom slowly began falling apart. The royal treasurer entered one council meeting carrying dozens of ledgers. "Our emergency grain reserves are inaccessible." Damien frowned. Why? The reserve system existed only because Queen Serena managed it personally. The foreign minister arrived the next day. "Our Western alliance has withdrawn." "I thought the treaty was secure." It was. But only because Queen Serena maintained personal correspondence with their ruling families. Then came another report. And another. Trade agreements expired. Orphanages lost funding. Village disputes turned violent. Scholarship programs collapsed. Every day revealed another invisible responsibility Serena had quietly carried alone. Finally, Chancellor Aldrich placed a towering stack of records before the throne. Every successful reform, every trade route, every emergency plan, every diplomatic agreement. Each document bore the same graceful signature. Serena Everhart. Damien stared at the pages in silence. He had believed he ruled beside an extraordinary Luna. The truth was far more painful. She had quietly carried half the kingdom while allowing him to receive most of the praise. Far beyond the northern mountains, during the fiercest snowstorm of the decade, a young pregnant woman collapsed beside the border of the Lycan Empire. Before darkness claimed her completely, she saw a stranger kneel beside her. His deep voice carried only one gentle promise. "You're safe now." Then everything faded into white. When Serena opened her eyes, she no longer felt the snow. Instead, she felt warmth. A fire crackled somewhere nearby. The scent of cedar and fresh herbs drifted through the room. For several quiet moments, she simply stared at the unfamiliar wooden ceiling above her. Then panic struck. Her hand flew to her stomach. The child. Another hand gently rested over hers. They're safe. Serena turned sharply. An elderly healer stood beside the bed with a reassuring smile. You've been asleep for 3 days. The little one is strong. Relief washed through Serena so suddenly that tears spilled down her cheeks. The healer handed her a cup of warm broth. You gave us quite a fright. We found you buried beneath the snow. Serena frowned. We? Before the healer could answer, the bedroom door opened. A tall man stepped inside. His black cloak still carried flecks of melting snow. Silver eyes met hers calmly, not with curiosity, not with suspicion, only quiet concern. The healer immediately bowed. Your Majesty. Serena's breath caught. The man who had rescued her was no ordinary traveller. He was King Lucian Nightbane, ruler of the Lycan Empire, and the Alpha Kingdom's greatest political rival. Lucian approached the bedside slowly. I apologize for frightening you. His voice was low and steady. Our patrol found you unconscious near the northern pass. Serena instinctively lowered her gaze. I should leave. Lucian looked genuinely puzzled. You've barely survived a blizzard. I don't wish to burden your kingdom. A faint smile touched his lips. A kingdom strong enough to shelter one exhausted traveller probably deserves to call itself a kingdom. For the first time in days, Serena almost smiled. Almost. Over the following weeks, her strength slowly returned. She expected questions. Who are you? Where did you come from? Why were you travelling alone? They never came. Lucian visited only occasionally, sometimes bringing books from the royal library, sometimes fresh fruit from the winter gardens, sometimes simply asking, How are you feeling today? Nothing more. One afternoon, Serena finally asked, Don't you want to know my story? Lucian looked up from the report he had been reading. When you're ready to tell it. He closed the document. You will. And if I never am? Then it will remain yours. The answer settled somewhere deep inside her heart. No one had ever offered her that kind of freedom before. Months passed. Spring replaced winter. The day finally arrived. The palace echoed with hurried footsteps as the royal healers gathered outside Serena's chamber. Lucian waited quietly in the corridor, not pacing, not issuing orders, simply waiting. Hours later, the cries of newborn children filled the palace. The healer emerged smiling. Congratulations, Your Majesty. Lucian frowned. I wasn't the one giving birth. The old woman laughed softly. No, but I suspect you'll spend the rest of your life protecting them. She stepped aside. Meet them. Lucian entered the room. Serena lay exhausted but smiling faintly. Beside her rested 2 tiny bundles wrapped in white blankets. Twins, a boy and a girl. The little boy slowly opened his eyes, bright silver, the unmistakable eyes of Damien Blackwood. Lucian noticed them immediately. So did Serena. A shadow crossed her face. Lucian quietly knelt beside the bed. He looked first at the children, then at Serena. They're beautiful, she whispered. They aren't yours. I know. She stared at him. You? No. He nodded gently. I've known from the beginning. Silence filled the room. She waited for questions, accusations, judgment. Instead, Lucian carefully touched the tiny hand of the sleeping little girl, then looked back at Serena. Children should never carry the weight of decisions they didn't make. He smiled warmly. As long as they live under my roof. They'll never have to. For the first time since the night she left the Alpha Kingdom, Serena cried. Not because her heart had broken again, but because someone had finally given her something she hadn't realized she was searching for. A place where she never had to wonder whether she and her children truly belonged. 7 years passed. The frightened young Luna, who had crossed the northern mountains carrying nothing but grief, became a woman the continent could no longer ignore. The Lycan Empire flourished under King Lucien's rule. Trade expanded across the eastern seas. Hospitals welcomed anyone in need. Schools opened in villages that had never before seen a teacher. Widows received pensions. Orphans found homes. Refugees found dignity. Whenever foreign rulers praised Lucien's remarkable reforms, he always gave the same answer. I was fortunate enough to marry a woman who sees possibilities where the rest of us see problems. Serena never tried to replace the life she had lost. She simply built a new one, not upon revenge, but upon trust. The royal twins grew into remarkable children. Prince Adrian possessed his mother's calm wisdom. Princess Alara inherited her fearless compassion. Both carried Damien Blackwood's unmistakable silver eyes. Yet they laughed like Lucian, walked beside him through the palace gardens, reached for his hand without hesitation. Because fatherhood had never been determined by blood alone. One autumn morning, white-sealed invitations arrived from the Continental Council. The annual peace summit would be held in the neutral city of Valemere. Every ruler was expected to attend. Lucian glanced towards Serena. "You don't have to come." She understood what he meant. Damien would be there, perhaps for the first time in 7 years. She remained quiet for several moments. Then she smiled. "I'm not the woman who left before dawn anymore." Lucian reached across the table and gently took her hand. "I know. Are you afraid?" She thought honestly before answering. "No. I think I'm finally free." Several weeks later, the Grand Assembly Hall overflowed with kings, queens, ministers, and ambassadors from every nation. Alpha King Damien Blackwood sat among them. Time had changed him. The confidence that once filled every room had been replaced by quiet humility. Silver now touched his dark hair. He listened more than he spoke. The doors at the far end of the hall slowly opened. The herald's voice echoed across the chamber. "Their Imperial Majesties, King Lucien Nightbane and Queen Serena Nightbane." Every ruler rose to their feet. Lucian entered first. His bearing remained calm and unshakable. Beside him walked Serena. She wore white and silver instead of the blue once reserved for the Alpha Kingdom. The imperial crown rested lightly upon her head. She looked neither nervous nor triumphant, only peaceful. Behind them came 2 children, a young prince, a young princess, each wearing the formal robes of the Lycan royal family. Damien looked up. His breath caught. The little boy turned toward one of the foreign delegates. Sunlight touched his face. Silver eyes. His own eyes. Then the little girl laughed at something her brother whispered. The same silver eyes sparkled with life. Damien felt the world tilt beneath him. His children, alive, healthy, growing up without him. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't even look away. Serena's gaze briefly met his across the crowded hall. There was no hatred there, no accusation, only the quiet dignity of a woman who had survived the worst night of her life and refused to let it define her future. The ceremony continued. Damien heard none of it. His eyes remained fixed on the twins. He noticed the way Lucien rested a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder, the way the little girl instinctively reached for Lucien's fingers, the way all 3 smiled at one another without effort. It wasn't forced. It wasn't political. It was family, for the first time in 7 years. Damien understood something more painful than losing his wife. Another man had become the father his children knew, and no amount of regret could reclaim the years he had lost. When the summit adjourned that evening, Damien sent only one request to the Lycan Palace, a private audience with King Lucien. The reply came before sunset. Approved. Tomorrow morning. The meeting took place at sunrise. Lucian chose neither a throne room nor a council chamber. Instead, he welcomed Damien into the palace gardens overlooking a quiet lake. The air carried the scent of pine and wildflowers. 2 cups of tea rested on a small stone table between them. No guard stood nearby. No ministers waited to witness the conversation. Lucian preferred honesty without an audience. Damien accepted the offered seat. For several moments, neither man spoke. Finally, Damien broke the silence. "I know those children are mine." Lucian nodded. "I've always known." Damien frowned. "You knew from the beginning? From the day your son opened his eyes?" The resemblance was impossible to miss. Damien stared into his untouched tea. "Then why?" Lucian tilted his head. "Why what? Why raise them? They aren't your blood." Lucian smiled faintly. "No, they're not." He looked toward the palace where the twins were beginning their morning lessons. "But children don't choose the circumstances of their birth. They shouldn't spend their lives paying for the mistakes of adults." Damien lowered his gaze. "They call you father." "They do. Doesn't it bother you?" Lucian seemed genuinely surprised. "Why would love bother me?" The question lingered between them. Damien searched for an answer. He couldn't find one. After a long silence, he whispered, "I loved Serena." Lucian nodded. "I believe you." "I never stopped. I believe that too." Damien looked up. "Then why did I lose her?" Lucian's expression remained calm. "You think you lost Serena the night she saw you kiss Vivian?" Damien swallowed hard. "Didn't I?" Lucien slowly shook his head. "No. You lost her long before that." Confusion crossed Damien's face. Lucien continued. "The kiss lasted a few seconds." He leaned forward slightly. "But the secret lasted for days. You arranged a private meeting. You kept it from your wife. You decided what she deserved to know." Damien's chest tightened. "I thought I was protecting her." Lucian's voice softened. "No. You were protecting yourself from an uncomfortable conversation." The words landed with devastating clarity. Damien remembered Serena's eyes that night. She hadn't looked angry. She had looked excluded. Like the one person who should have known the truth had been left outside it. Lucian spoke again. "Do you know the first promise I ever made Serena?" Damien slowly shook his head. "I told her that she would never have to wonder where she stood with me." Silence settled over the garden. The morning breeze stirred the branches overhead. "I never asked about her past. I never demanded explanations. When she was ready, she told me everything herself." Lucian smiled gently. "Trust grows best where fear isn't invited." Damien closed his eyes. For years, he had blamed one terrible decision. One kiss, one tragic misunderstanding. Now he finally saw the deeper wound. Serena hadn't left because Vivian existed. She had left because the foundation beneath their marriage had cracked the moment he chose secrecy over honesty. He opened his eyes again. "You loved her better than I did." Lucian didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked toward the palace, where Serena stood on a balcony watching the twins chase one another through the gardens. Her laughter drifted softly across the morning air. Finally, he spoke. "I didn't love her more. I simply loved her in the way she deserved." Damien felt his throat tighten. There was nothing to argue with, nothing to defend, only truth. As he rose to leave, Lucian stopped him with one final sentence. "Regret can make a man bitter." He met Damien's eyes. "Or it can make him worthy of the lessons it teaches." Weeks later, those lessons would be tested, because a drought unlike any in living memory was already spreading toward the Alpha Kingdom. And soon, Damien would have no choice but to kneel before the woman he had lost. The drought began quietly. A single failed harvest, then another. By the end of summer, rivers had narrowed into shallow streams, and wheat fields across the Alpha Kingdom stood dry and brittle beneath an unforgiving sun. Village elders traveled for days to reach the capital. Their reports were all the same. The wells were empty. The grain stores were nearly gone. Children were eating only one meal every 2 days. Inside the royal council chamber, The mood was grim. Maps covered the great oak table. Red markers identified the provinces most affected. The Minister of Agriculture spoke first. If the rains don't come within a month, we'll lose the winter harvest as well. The royal treasurer quietly added, our emergency reserves are exhausted. Damien already knew why. Years earlier, Serena had created a network of reserve granaries across the kingdom. After she left, poor management and political greed had slowly dismantled the system she had built. He had restored much of it, but not fast enough. Not before disaster struck. The Chancellor broke the silence. There is only one kingdom with enough grain to help us. No one needed him to say the name. The Lycan Empire. Damien rose slowly. I'll go. The captain of the guard stepped forward. Your Majesty, we'll prepare the royal escort. Damien shook his head. No banners. No soldiers. No ceremony. He looked around the council table. My pride has already cost my people enough. 3 days later, he entered the magnificent imperial palace of the Lycan Empire. Everything about the kingdom reflected careful leadership. The streets were orderly, the markets were full. No hungry children begged outside the gates. The prosperity was impossible to ignore. He was escorted into the imperial hall. At the far end of the chamber stood 2 identical white thrones. Upon one sat King Lucien, upon the other, Queen Serena. The twins sat nearby, quietly listening to a lesson from one of their tutors before the audience began. When the herald announced Damien's arrival, every conversation ceased. The great hall fell into complete silence. Damien walked forward alone. Each step echoed across the polished marble floor. He stopped before the twin thrones. For one long moment, he simply looked at Serena. She had changed. Not because power had transformed her, because peace had. The uncertainty that once shadowed her eyes was gone. She no longer wondered where she belonged. She already knew. Slowly, Damien lowered himself onto one knee. Gasps echoed through the hall. An Alpha King had knelt before another ruler, not because he had been defeated in battle, because he had come asking for mercy. His head remained bowed. I haven't come asking for another chance. His voice carried clearly through the silent chamber. I know I lost that privilege years ago. He drew a slow breath. I've come asking you to save my people. They've done nothing wrong. They shouldn't suffer because of my mistakes. Silence followed. Serena looked at him for a long moment. Then she rose from her throne. The entire court watched as she descended the marble steps. She stopped only a few feet away. The innocent should never pay for the failures of their rulers. She turned toward the Imperial Council. Open the eastern and northern granaries. Prepare medical caravans. Send agricultural advisors. Every shipment leaves before sunrise. One minister asked quietly, Your Majesty, should we negotiate compensation? Serena smiled gently. No. We're feeding families, not conducting business. Lucien watched her with quiet admiration, not surprise. He had always known this was the kind of woman she was. Damien slowly lifted his eyes. Emotion threatened to overwhelm him. You've saved my kingdom. Serena shook her head softly. I helped your people. There is a difference. For the second time in his life, Damien watched the woman he loved choose compassion over bitterness. The first time, he had failed to understand her. This time, he finally did. The grain caravans reached the Alpha Kingdom before the first snowfall. Village after village was saved. Children who had gone days without proper meals laughed again. The elderly survived the winter. Farmers received fresh seed for spring planting. Not a single shipment carried the price of political favors, only the seal of the Lycan Empire. And one short message from Queen Serena. May this harvest become the beginning of your next one. Throughout the continent, rulers praised the generosity of the Lycan Empire. Lucian accepted none of the praise. During a council meeting, one minister remarked, "Your Majesties have strengthened the Empire's influence more than any military victory could." Lucian smiled. "We didn't send grain to gain influence." He glanced toward Serena. "We sent it because hungry children should never become weapons." Serena simply nodded. Compassion should never require an audience. Years passed. The twins grew into remarkable young leaders. Prince Adrian possessed an extraordinary gift for diplomacy. He could settle arguments before voices were ever raised. Princess Alara inherited Serena's fierce compassion. She visited hospitals, orphanages, and farming villages long before anyone expected a princess to concern herself with ordinary people. Neither child knew the bitterness of divided loyalties. Lucian never hid the truth of their birth. One evening, when Adrian was old enough to ask difficult questions, he quietly said, "Father." Lucian looked up from the book he was reading. "Yes. I know King Damien is my birth father." Lucian closed the book. "I know you do." Adrian hesitated. "Were you ever angry because Mother loved someone else first?" Lucien smiled gently. "No." "Why not?" "Because love isn't a competition." He rested a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Your mother chose where she wanted to spend the rest of her life. That choice was enough for me." The answer stayed with Adrian forever. Across the mountains, Damien kept his own promise. He rebuilt the reserve granaries Serena had once designed. He restored funding to orphanages. He established village councils with equal voting rights. Whenever his ministers praised the reforms, he always corrected them. "These aren't my ideas. They're lessons I learned far too late." He also ordered a memorial to be built in honor of Lady Vivian Ashcroft. Many questioned the decision. Damien answered them himself. "She made a mistake. So did I. But before she died, she reminded me who truly deserved my love." The memorial bore only one inscription: "May every goodbye be spoken with honesty." Meanwhile, the Lycan Empire became known as the safest kingdom on the continent, not because its armies were the strongest, because its people trusted one another. Foreign rulers began sending their heirs to study there. The first lesson every future king and queen received was never about warfare, it was about trust. During one lecture, Serena stood before a hall filled with young rulers. She held up a simple drinking cup. "If I drop this..." She released it. The cup shattered across the stone floor. The students jumped. She smiled kindly. "Trust is much like this." She knelt and picked up a broken piece. "You can repair it. You can even make it beautiful again." She looked around the room. "But it will never be exactly as it was before." The hall remained silent. No one forgot that lesson, because it hadn't been learned from a book. It had been lived by the woman standing before them, and slowly, her story stopped being remembered as one of betrayal. It became remembered as the story of a queen who proved that kingdoms built on trust could outlast kingdoms built on power. 20 years after the anniversary that changed 3 lives forever, the story had become part of history. Young rulers studied it in royal academies. Scholars debated it in universities. Parents repeated it to their children on quiet winter evenings, not as a tale of betrayal, but as a lesson about trust. Every spring, the rulers of the continent gathered once more for the Grand Peace Summit. The Lycan Empire remained its gracious host. Its cities had become symbols of prosperity. Its hospitals welcomed strangers without question. Its schools educated children from every kingdom. Its people often said, the empire's greatest treasure wasn't its wealth, it was the certainty that everyone knew where they belonged. Among the visiting rulers was an older Alpha King, Damien Blackwood. Time had silvered his hair and softened the pride that had once defined him. His kingdom had recovered. Not because he had become perfect, but because he had spent decades trying to become the kind of king Serena had always believed he could be. Whenever young Alphas asked how he transformed his reign, he always gave the same answer. I finally learned that honesty is easier than regret. One afternoon, After the summit concluded, several young rulers gathered around him in the palace gardens. Prince Adrian and Princess Alara stood nearby, now respected leaders in their own right. A young Alpha Prince asked the question everyone else seemed afraid to voice. "Your Majesty." Damien smiled gently. "Go on. Do you still love Queen Serena?" The gardens became very quiet. Damien looked across the courtyard. Lucienne and Serena were walking together beneath blooming cherry trees. They weren't speaking. They didn't need to. Years of trust had made silence comfortable instead of frightening. A little farther ahead, Adrian laughed as Alara teased him about an upcoming diplomatic mission. Lucienne rested a hand on Serena's shoulder. She leaned into him without hesitation. It was the smallest gesture, yet it revealed everything. She had never again doubted where she belonged. Damien smiled. "Yes." The young rulers waited. "I always will, but love doesn't give me ownership." He looked back at them. "It gives me responsibility. Responsibility for the mistakes I made. Responsibility to ensure no one under my care ever repeats them." Another student asked quietly, "Is that why you teach every future alpha about honesty?" Damien nodded. The kiss lasted only a few seconds. He paused. The secret lasted much longer. And secrets are what destroy trust. Across the gardens, Serena noticed the group watching. She smiled politely and inclined her head toward Damien. He returned the gesture with quiet respect. Nothing more was needed. Later that evening, the royal twins stood beneath the great marble arch at the entrance to the imperial hall. Carved into the white stone were the words Serena and Lucienne had chosen together. "Love survives mistakes. Trust does not survive secrets." Adrian read them aloud. "I think that's the greatest lesson Mother ever taught us." Lucienne smiled. "No." Adrian looked surprised. "It isn't." Lucienne shook his head gently. "The greatest lesson she taught..." He looked toward Serena, who was greeting children from a visiting orphanage with the same warmth she'd shown everyone throughout her life. "Is that forgiveness doesn't always mean returning. Sometimes, it simply means refusing to let yesterday decide tomorrow." Years later, historians remembered 3 remarkable rulers. They remembered Damien Blackwood as the Alpha King who transformed regret into wisdom. They remembered Lucian Nightbane as the king who proved love protects rather than possesses. But above all, they remembered Queen Serena Everhart Nightbane, the woman who walked away with a broken heart, returned with a kingdom built on trust, raised 2 extraordinary children, surrounded by unwavering love, and showed the world that the greatest victory after betrayal is not revenge. It is finding a place where you never have to question whether you are truly cherished.